Richmond, Virginia is known for many things. It is known for its history, both the tragic and the great, and is known for its modern happenings. It is the capital of the state, the seat of political corruption, and a blooming college town. Its biggest school, Virginia Commonwealth University, has drawn criticism over the years for the inhumane animal testing on its medical campus. This has concerned many people, but at least the public is aware of experiments on animals. However, it's the experiments at the medical campus that the public doesn't know about that ought to concern you. I am a former U.S. Army specialist, and what I am about to reveal to you is highly classified information. I used to be very patriotic and never believed in black helicopter theories until I was assigned to conduct experiments on human beings in Richmond. I used to consider people like Daniel Ellsberg and P.S.C. Manning to be traitors. Until recently, that is. Now I see the ethical crises they faced. Now I see the nightmares they had. It was just become so damn hard for me to live myself. I have nightmares every night. I can't sleep and often wake in a cold sweat, gasping for air. America needs to know the evil that its government is up to. Unfortunately, our secret facility is closely monitored. Personnel are forbidden to bring anything in or out of the research facility without permission from Colonel Oxley, the man in charge of the experiment. All of my documents and materials were confiscated when I resigned from my position in disgust last September. I only have my memories to go by, but I have an excellent memory. The Army has been conducting mind control and mutation experiments in Richmond since the early 2000s, but the experiments went in a new direction when I was assigned to the local facilities in 2010. The reason the Army chose Richmond is because it was close enough to be easily monitored by federal bigwigs in their Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia headquarters. But at the same time, it's far enough away that anything goes wrong, there won't be a threat to the lives, facilities, families, and neighborhoods of those bigwigs. So what exactly are we doing in Richmond? Well, have you heard the conspiracy theories about radio frequency identification chips? Some people say the government wants to implant them into all citizens in order to easily monitor and track them. Though this isn't exactly true, Uncle Sam is experimenting with the use of special microchips, known as H-chips, to control human thought. A corps of elite U.S. Army scientists, with the full cooperation and sworn silence of the Virginia Commonwealth University president and local police chiefs, is kidnapping students in order to implant microchips into their brains to control their every thought. When you think about it, VCU is the perfect place for this because it is a state university. We never get permission to experiment on rich kids in a private school like the University of Richmond. Besides, the people at the Pentagon probably have some family members there anyway. After a few months of preparation, we began our research on unsuspecting first and second year students in 2010. The first student I operated on was a sophomore named Sophia. She was short, cute, and had lovely black hair. It was short for a girl, stopping just before it had reached her shoulders. She was a petite girl, so she was easy to just snatch up off the gray street in 2 in the morning. We joked about how we wouldn't need to chloroform her since she looked so weak and innocent. But we didn't want to take any risk, so we chloroformed her anyway, stuffed her in the back of our black van, and carted off to a secret room in a sub-basement of medical campus. I really liked Sophia's hair, but unfortunately we had to shave a quarter of it off on the front side of her head in order to drill into her skull to implant the chip. This has become a popular hairstyle among young people these days, and it is in no small part due to our experiments. The chip needed 24 hours to adjust her brainwaves, so we needed to keep her locked up until the H-chip was ready to alter her mind. We kept her strapped down in the same fashion as Hannibal Lecter, which was funny to me at the time because she was such a cute, petite little girl. We weren't concerned that she would hurt us. We were concerned that she might do to herself. In a surgical wound on her head where we implanted the chip. Eventually our drugs wore off and she woke up, demanding to know where she was and what we had done to her to give her such a severe headache. But no answers were forthcoming for Sophia. We had left her alone in a little holding room. There she pled and cried into the darkness for mercy and answers, but it was all in vain because us scientists had gone home until the following day, where she would be ready. The chip finally adjusted to the dynamics of her brain the following day. When we entered the holding room to activate her, she had a look of both fear and relief on her face. She was just happy to have the lights back on and to see another human being. But she was still clearly terrified. She trembled in such a cute way, almost like a newborn kitten trying to move around for the first time. She pleaded with us for answers and begged us for mercy, but we simply ignored her. Our band in a control room activated her chip, typed in some code, and that was it. That would be the last time Sophia saw or said anything. Yes, she is still alive, but at the same time, Sophia really isn't Sophia anymore. Her thoughts and words are no longer her own. Everything that cute little sophomore once was has been erased. She now thinks, speaks, and acts as her programming directs her, almost like a Cyberman from Doctor Who, except with a human body and less desire to destroy. Except when Uncle Sam demands otherwise. After putting H-chips in the heads of 500 students, the fun, or should I say horror, truly began. At first we had them do silly things like dye their hair a ridiculous color, and grow a handlebar mustache or a beard, get a stupid nose ring, or ride a bicycle that looked like it came straight out of Dr. Seuss. We chose these things because they were low-key, despite their absurdness. People would expect college students to dress and act silly. Results were very positive for the government. Not only did the activated specimens follow their programming precisely, other students we hadn't snatched off the street began to imitate and follow the trends of the 500 students controlled by an H-chip. To an evil government scientist, the sight of this was most excellent. I apologize that I haven't made the purpose of our experiment or project quite clear. As we stated before, we're working on perfecting mind control. Why? Well, first you should ask yourself what the purpose of government is, first and foremost. It is to protect the power and properties of the elites. If we could successfully implant H-chips into 3% of the US population, millions and millions of other citizens would follow the lead of the 3%. It is a cost-effective measure to control a population that was deeply angered and growing restless with frustration due to never-ending recession, foreclosures, endless wars, and increasingly obvious police state, the loss of their rights and the destruction of their social safety nets. They say a nation is only 3 missed meals away from revolution, but the wealthy of America weren't about to sacrifice increasing profits just because some commoner had no work, no food, and no shelter. The students were chipped, and those that imitated them came to be labeled as hipsters by the public. It was no accident that they were called hipsters. The government invented the hipster lifestyle specifically for its mind control experiments. Don't make the mistake of thinking this was only in Richmond. The project, known as Project Sadnam, had been going on across the country before I was assigned to Richmond. We invented these hipsters because we had a pressing need for weird people in America. But to see what we could get away with, to see how ridiculous something has to be for people to avoid imitating Apparently, the American public will ape just about anything crazy if it's popular enough. Sometime in June 2013, working a slow workday, I went into the file room in search of information on previous abductees for an analysis I wanted to work on. Before I could locate the files, however, I came across one labeled Failed Activations. I opened it up and looked at the first file. It contained information about a young exchange student from Britain named Jonathan. He had been given a beta version of the H-chip just before I joined the project. Intrigued, I continued reading. Jonathan was to be the first person we tested our H-chip on. As an exchange student, he was the right person for the experiment to go wrong on. Nobody in America would be too upset about his fate to ask too many questions about what exactly was going on at the VCU. Apparently, the frequency of this beta chip was set incorrectly, causing him to have an adverse reaction to it. File said Jonathan went mad once we tried to activate him, describing his screams to be almost inhuman. His screams were described as a cross between a siren and the buzzing of an old dishwasher just about to be set off. He wasn't strapped down properly, so he began clawing at his eyes and hair. Still screaming, the report describes how the other scientists attempted to shut off his chip or change some of its codes in hopes of calming him down, but it was all unsuccessful. You know the stories about how the government makes people just disappear, how it kidnaps subversives and nobody ever sees or hears from them again? Well, the American government doesn't apprehend subversives. It was never as secretive as the totalitarian regimes of yesteryear, and its army policy to make the death look common or accidental, something unsuspicious. Eventually, the team just increased the power of his chip until his brain burst. The file contained photos of the effects. Blood ran out of every orifice of his head. His eyes bulged as they rolled back into his face. His head had swollen to an abnormal size and became discolored. The team took his body to the James River, stripped it down to his clothes, would be left behind as evidence of his suicide, and his corpse dumped in the river. Chief Norwood at the Richmond Police Department was informed before we dumped his body. He ensured that the police would conduct the best possible cover-up without his officers actually knowing what was going on. To this day, the public still believes Jonathan committed suicide. Norwood's long-standing cooperation with our unit of scientists was eventually rewarded with a nice cushy job as the chief of police for Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority. It was after reading Jonathan's file that I began to question what I was doing. I'm a horrible human being for letting things go on for so long. I felt torn. Why was I facing this ethical dilemma and not earlier? I guess just being in the army and exposed to the things we see or hear on a regular basis can desensitize you to the inhumanity of your mission. Or maybe I'm just making up excuses. What a sorry excuse for a man I am. As much as I'd like to finish this, I need to move. I was in Mexico earlier. Now I am destined for another country in Latin America, much like Snowden. I need to keep moving to avoid capture by the government. If I am apprehended, they may put an H-chip in me.